Have you ever noticed something strange? Sometimes, just before life changes in a profound way, everything seems to fall apart. Not a little, completely. The job you've had for years suddenly no longer feels right. Relationships that once felt effortless begin to crack. The dreams that used to motivate you lose their power. Even the version of yourself you've spent years building starts to feel unfamiliar. It's confusing because, from the outside, nothing makes sense. You haven't decided to destroy your life. You didn't wake up one morning wanting everything to change. And yet, piece by piece, the old world begins to disappear. Most people assume this means something has gone terribly wrong. They panic. They fight to rebuild what is already collapsing. They desperately try to become the person they used to be. But what if that instinct is exactly what keeps them stuck? What if the collapse isn't the problem? What if it's the beginning? For centuries, philosophers, mystics, psychologists, and ordinary people have described a mysterious period that seems to appear before profound transformation. A season where certainty disappears, direction is lost, and even your own identity begins to dissolve. Some have called it a crisis. Others have called it depression. Mystics gave it another name, the dark night of the soul. Not because life becomes dark, but because, for a while, you can no longer see the path ahead. And maybe, if you're watching this video today, you're standing in that darkness right now. One of the hardest parts about going through a season like this is that almost nobody around you can see it. From the outside, your life may look exactly the same. You still go to work, you answer messages, you smile when people expect you to smile. You keep moving because that's what everyone else seems to be doing. But underneath that routine, something has quietly changed. The life that once felt familiar no longer feels like home. You begin waking up with a strange feeling that you can't explain. Nothing is obviously wrong, yet nothing feels entirely right. The goals you've been chasing for years suddenly seem distant, as if they belong to someone else. Conversations that once energized you now leave you feeling empty. Places you've loved your whole life somehow feel different. Even moments that should make you happy seem strangely muted. At first, you assume you're simply exhausted. Maybe you need a vacation. Maybe you've been working too hard. Maybe you're just going through a phase. So you do what most people do. You try to fix the feeling. You stay busier. You set new goals. You distract yourself with entertainment, social media, shopping, or endless productivity. Anything to avoid sitting alone with the discomfort. But the feeling doesn't leave. In fact, the more you try to outrun it, the more persistent it becomes. It's like hearing a quiet knock at the door that slowly grows louder each time you ignore it. Eventually, you realize the discomfort isn't coming from your circumstances alone. It's coming from somewhere much deeper. Perhaps this is why so many people describe this period as loneliness, even when they are surrounded by others. It's not simply the absence of company. It's the unsettling experience of realizing that the person you've been for years no longer fits the life you're living, while the person you're becoming has not fully arrived. For a while, you seem to belong to neither world. The old identity is fading. The new one has not yet taken shape, and that space in between can feel incredibly lonely. If you've ever been through a period like this, you probably asked yourself the same question almost everyone does. Why is this happening to me? It feels as if life has suddenly turned against you. The harder you try to fix things, the more they seem to slip through your fingers. You begin to wonder if you've made a terrible mistake. Maybe you've taken the wrong path. Maybe you're failing. Maybe you're simply losing yourself. But here's something worth considering. What if your mind is interpreting change as danger? The human brain is remarkably good at keeping us alive. For thousands of years, survival depended on recognizing familiar patterns and avoiding uncertainty. Predictability meant safety. The unknown could mean starvation, exile, or death. Although our world has changed dramatically, our nervous system still reacts to uncertainty as if it were a threat. That's why major life transitions often feel so unsettling. Even positive change can trigger anxiety because the brain isn't asking, "Is this transformation meaningful?" It's asking a much simpler question: is this familiar? When the answer is no, alarm bells begin to ring. This is why people often cling to relationships that no longer nourish them, careers that drain them, or identities they've already outgrown. Not because those things make them happy, but because they are familiar. Familiarity creates the illusion of safety, even when it quietly keeps us from growing. Imagine climbing a mountain through thick fog. The old path disappears beneath your feet before the new one becomes visible. For a while, it feels as though there is no path at all. That doesn't necessarily mean you're lost. It may simply mean your perspective has not caught up with your movement. Perhaps the most painful part of transformation is not the uncertainty itself. It's the story we tell ourselves about it. We assume that confusion means failure. We believe that not knowing what comes next is proof that something has gone wrong. Yet some of the most significant turning points in life begin exactly this way, not with clarity, but with uncertainty. Maybe the real question isn't, why is everything falling apart? Maybe the better question is, what is trying to emerge that can no longer fit inside the life I've been living? What if we've been looking at this experience from the wrong angle? When something in our lives begins to fall apart, our first instinct is almost always to ask, how do I stop this? We assume that stability is always a sign that we're on the right path, and disruption must mean we've taken a wrong turn. But life doesn't always seem to work that way. Think about the moments that have changed you the most. Very few of them began with certainty. More often, they started with confusion. A career that suddenly ended. A relationship that no longer reflected who you had become. A dream that quietly lost its meaning. Looking back, many people eventually realize those moments didn't simply take something away. They created space for something that couldn't have existed before. Nature offers an interesting perspective. A forest doesn't remain unchanged forever. Old trees fall, not because the forest has failed, but because change creates room for new growth. In the same way, a snake cannot continue growing without leaving its old skin behind. If it tried to hold on to what once protected it, that very protection would eventually become a prison. Perhaps people experience something similar. We build identities that help us survive one chapter of life. We learn how to succeed, how to be accepted, how to avoid disappointment, how to fit into the expectations of others. Those identities serve an important purpose, but they are not necessarily meant to last forever. The difficulty is that we rarely notice when we've outgrown them. We only notice the discomfort. We feel the tension between who we've been and who we are slowly becoming. And because we can't yet see the next version of ourselves, we assume something has gone wrong. But what if that discomfort isn't evidence that life is breaking? What if it's evidence that your old way of living can no longer contain the person you're becoming? Maybe transformation doesn't always begin by adding something new. Sometimes it begins by making it impossible to keep living as the person you used to be. This may be the point where the story splits into two completely different directions. Not because life chooses favorites, not because some people are destined to succeed while others are not, but because this is often the moment when fear quietly begins making decisions on our behalf. When uncertainty lasts longer than we expected, our natural instinct is to return to what we already know, even if what we know wasn't making us happy. It sounds irrational, but psychologists have observed this pattern for decades. Human beings are generally more motivated to avoid loss than to pursue possible gain. The familiar feels safer than the unknown, even when the familiar is painful. That's why someone returns to a relationship that has already broken their heart, why they accept a job that slowly drains them, why they abandon a dream they genuinely cared about. Not because those choices are right, but because certainty can feel more comforting than possibility. There is another reason this moment is so difficult. Your old identity has spent years convincing you that it exists to protect you. It whispers, "Don't risk it. Stay where you know who you are. At least here you understand the rules." And for a while, that voice sounds incredibly reasonable. After all, who willingly walks into uncertainty? Who leaves behind a version of themselves without knowing what comes next? But perhaps that is exactly why transformation is so rare. Most people are willing to change their circumstances. Far fewer are willing to let go of the identity that created those circumstances in the first place. Because changing your habits is uncomfortable. Changing your schedule is difficult. Changing the story you've believed about yourself for years can feel like losing a part of who you are. Yet perhaps this is the quiet paradox hidden inside every major transformation. The life you've been asking for may require becoming someone your current identity cannot imagine. And that is why the path forward almost always feels invisible. Not because there is no path, but because the person searching for it is slowly becoming someone new. Perhaps one of the greatest misconceptions about transformation is the belief that every question must be answered immediately. When life stops making sense, our first instinct is to search for certainty. We want a plan, a guarantee, a clear explanation for why everything is happening. We tell ourselves, once I understand this, I'll finally feel at peace. But life rarely offers clarity in advance. More often, understanding arrives only after we've already walked through the experience. Think about your own past. How many moments that once felt unbearable eventually became turning points you could only appreciate in hindsight? At the time, they looked like endings. Years later, they became the beginning of stories you couldn't imagine living without. Perhaps this season asks for something different. Not immediate answers, not perfect confidence, but the willingness to remain present, even when the road disappears for a while. There is a quiet strength in admitting that you don't know exactly where life is leading you. Our culture often celebrates certainty. We admire people who seem to have everything figured out. We believe confidence means always knowing the next step. Yet some of the wisest people who have ever lived described life very differently. They spoke about patience, about humility, about learning to stay with uncertainty instead of trying to escape it. Maybe wisdom isn't the absence of questions. Maybe wisdom is becoming less afraid of not having all the answers. Because there is something remarkable about the human mind. When it stops spending all of its energy fighting reality, it begins noticing possibilities that were invisible before. The future doesn't always become clearer because the world changes. Sometimes it becomes clearer because we do. And perhaps that is the quiet work taking place beneath the surface during seasons like this. Not rebuilding your old life,
but slowly preparing you to recognize a new one when it finally appears.
There is an interesting question that most of us never think to ask. What if the most important chapters of our lives don't begin when everything finally makes sense? What if they begin much earlier, during the months when nothing seems to make sense at all? It's easy to admire someone after they've rebuilt their life, after they've found meaningful work, after they've discovered love again, after they've become calm, confident, and comfortable in their own skin. But we rarely see the invisible chapter that came before all of that. The mornings when getting out of bed felt difficult. The nights spent wondering whether anything would ever feel normal again. The quiet moments when they questioned every decision they had ever made. Perhaps every transformed life contains a chapter that almost no one else gets to witness. A chapter filled with uncertainty, silence, and the uncomfortable feeling that everything familiar is slipping away. Maybe that chapter isn't a mistake.
Maybe it is part of becoming. None of us can know exactly why certain seasons arrive when they do. Life is far too complex for simple explanations. But perhaps there is value in remembering this. Not every ending is a failure. Not every period of confusion is a sign that you've lost your way. Sometimes we only recognize the purpose of a season after we have already walked beyond it. And maybe one day you'll look back at this period, not with resentment, but with gratitude. Not because it was easy, not because you would ever choose to live through it again, but because you'll finally see what it quietly made possible. So if your life feels uncertain today, if you're standing between the person you used to be and the person you have not yet become, perhaps you don't need to rush toward the light. Perhaps for now, it's enough to keep walking. One step, one honest day, one quiet breath at a time. Because sometimes, the darkest night isn't there to hide the road. Sometimes, it's where your eyes slowly learn to see. Thank you for watching. If you'd like to keep exploring the hidden patterns of the human mind, consciousness, and the way our inner world gradually becomes the reality we experience, consider subscribing. This is only the beginning of our exploration. Until next time.